What would you do if your own father told your 6-year-old daughter to sit on the floor in a packed restaurant, not because there weren't enough chairs, but because he believed she didn't deserve one? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let me take you back to last Friday. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, a celebration. My father, Richard Brooks, had just retired after 38 years as a regional finance director. He picked the restaurant himself. A place with polished wooden tables, warm yellow lighting, and just enough background music to make conversations feel private even when they weren't. My daughter Maya had been excited all week. She's 6. And in her mind, dinner with Grandpa meant dressing up. She wore her favorite lavender dress, the one with the tiny silver stars stitched along the hem. She even practiced saying, "Congratulations on your retirement, Grandpa," in the mirror the night before. That's the kind of child she is. Careful, thoughtful, always trying to do things right. We arrived early. My sister Natalie was already there with her fiancé Marcus. Richard's partner, Susan, was flipping through the menu. Everything looked normal, comfortable, predictable, until the waiter arrived to seat us. He pulled out the chairs one by one. Natalie sat. Marcus sat. Susan smiled politely and sat down. Maya reached for the chair beside me, the one the waiter had just pulled back for her. And that's when my father spoke. Calmly, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "No, she can sit on the floor. Kids like her don't need chairs." Not loud, but loud enough. The couple at the next table stopped talking. Someone behind us dropped a fork. The waiter froze mid-step, still holding the back of another chair. Maya looked up at me, confused. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" And here's the part that surprised everyone. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look shocked. I just looked my father in the eye and said 4 words. The waiter stopped moving completely. My father's smile disappeared. Because those 4 words weren't just a response. They were something I had been waiting 27 years to say. Why would a grandfather humiliate his own granddaughter in public and expect everyone to just go along with it? Because for my father, this wasn't new. It was a pattern. You see, growing up with Richard Brooks meant understanding one very specific rule. Respect was not automatic. It was earned. And in his mind, children started life with none of it. When I was 8, he made me eat in the kitchen while his coworkers dined in the living room because, and I quote, "guests shouldn't have to listen to childish chewing." At 10, I was told to go upstairs during his birthday party because I laughed too loudly at something my cousin said. And at 12? I remember standing beside the dining table while everyone else sat because there weren't enough chairs for both children and adults. There were 6 empty ones. So when he said Maya could sit on the floor, part of me wasn't surprised. But hearing it out loud in a crowded restaurant with strangers watching, that hit differently. Around the table, you could feel the discomfort spreading. Susan shifted in her seat but said nothing. Natalie suddenly found something very interesting on her napkin. Marcus picked up his phone like he'd just remembered an urgent text. No one spoke. And Maya? She wasn't crying. Not yet. She was just confused. Her hand stayed on the back of the chair for a second before she looked up at me again. "Mommy, did I do something wrong? And tell me honestly, if that were your child, would you protect them immediately, or would you freeze like I did?" Because I hesitated. Not because I agreed with him, but because I knew exactly what happened every time someone challenged Richard in public. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He punished later. Quietly. And permanently. Then he leaned back in his chair, glanced around at the table, and said with a small smirk, "Discipline starts young." He thought I would comply. What he didn't know was that I didn't come to this dinner expecting peace. I came already prepared for this exact moment. What if this wasn't the first time my father had crossed a line, just the first time he'd done it in front of people who couldn't pretend it didn't happen? Because the truth is, Richard Brooks had been drawing lines around Maya since the day she was born. He never said it directly. That would have been too obvious. Too easy to challenge. Instead, it showed up in smaller ways. like skipping her 5th birthday party because, according to him, children's gatherings are chaotic and unnecessary. But somehow, he never missed Marcus's poker nights. Or the time at her school's open day when her teacher asked if he was Maya's grandfather, and he smiled politely before saying, "I'm here supporting my daughter. The child is her responsibility. Not our child. Not my granddaughter. The child." And now here we were. Back in the restaurant. Back at the table. Maya slowly began removing her coat, her tiny fingers fumbling with the sleeves like she was trying not to take up too much space. Like she was already preparing to make herself smaller. To sit on the floor. That's when I noticed the woman at the next table watching us. Not casually. Intently. Her lips pressed together like she was debating whether to say something. The waiter hadn't moved either. He was still standing there with another chair half pulled out, eyes flicking between me and my father like he'd just walked into a conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. And suddenly, I wasn't in that restaurant anymore. I was 7 again. Standing beside my father's office dinner table in socks while everyone else sat, holding a paper plate because, as he whispered in my ear that night, chairs are for people who matter. Do you know what it feels like to hear your childhood repeating itself, but this time, it's aimed at your own child? Marcus leaned slightly toward Natalie and whispered, "Is he serious right now?" Richard tapped the table twice with his finger. Sharp. Impatient. "We don't have all night." And that's when I finally opened my mouth to speak. And the entire table went silent. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the calmest voice in the room carries the sharpest truth? Because when I finally spoke, I didn't shout. I didn't slam the table. I didn't even look angry. I just said, quietly enough that only our table should have heard it. "Then I'll stand too." For a second, nothing happened. Like the words hadn't fully landed yet. Then Natalie's chair scraped lightly against the floor as she shifted. Marcus looked up from his phone. Susan's lips parted like she wanted to interrupt, but didn't. I reached for Maya's hand. Gently. No rush. No drama. And I stood up beside her. Now it wasn't just a child without a seat. It was a child and her mother. Standing. In the middle of a full restaurant. You could feel the air change. The waiter stopped pretending to look busy. The couple at the next table weren't even hiding their stares anymore. Someone across the aisle leaned slightly to get a better view. My father let out a short laugh. Tight. Controlled. "Don't be dramatic, Elena." But I didn't respond. I just stayed standing. Maya's small hand tightened around mine, and after a moment, I added, still calm, still steady. "If she doesn't deserve a seat, neither do I." That's when his smile finally started to crack. Because suddenly, this wasn't private anymore. This wasn't something he could dismiss later in the car ride home or twist into a lecture about obedience. People were watching. Strangers were watching. And for the first time in my life, Richard Brooks looked unsure. But before he could say anything else, before he could take control of the moment the way he always did, someone unexpected pushed their chair back. Who do you think it was? Because honestly, I didn't expect it to be Susan. Her chair slid back slowly, the legs dragging softly across the floor before she stood up beside us. "Richard," she said quietly, "that's enough. No yelling. No accusation. Just enough." And something about hearing it from her, the person who had defended him for the past 12 years, the one who always explained away his old-fashioned standards, made the moment heavier. Natalie looked from me, to Maya, then to our father. And she stood too. Marcus followed right after, muttering, "Yeah, this is not okay," under his breath as his chair joined the others now sitting empty around the table. One by one. Chair after chair. Still untouched. Until suddenly, the only person sitting down was Richard. Do you understand how fast control can disappear when silence breaks? A minute ago, Maya was the only one without a seat. Now, he was the only one with one. I felt Maya look up at me, confused but curious, like she didn't fully understand what was happening, just that something had shifted in her favor. So I knelt beside her, right there in the middle of the restaurant floor. And I told her softly, "You never sit on the floor to make someone else comfortable." That's when the manager approached, clearly having heard enough from nearby tables. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He simply pulled out a fresh chair, placed it beside me, and said, "This one is for you, sweetheart." The same chair my father said she didn't need. The same seat he thought she hadn't earned. And as Maya climbed into it, smiling again, like nothing had happened, I looked across the table at the man who had spent decades deciding who did and didn't deserve a place. And realized something. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to sit down.